10 weeks down, and 10 to go. Overwatch League's second season has reached the halfway point, bringing with it another stage playoff. The contenders have started to separate themselves from the pretenders, and honestly what most assume to be a two-horse race has a lot more people with a shot at the prize than you might think. Who's entering the gauntlet this time?
Victory!
Man, what a stage it's been for the boys in blue. While it started off a bit sad with Effect's retirement, the Fuel have gone 5-2 this stage, launched a cute little cartoon series with Jack in the Box, and oh yeah, they've played in front of thousands of cheering fans. Watching those games, even through the stream, was an insane experience. You could just feel the energy of the crowd, and it made all of the games so much fun to watch, even the roles. And I think it's been affecting the team as well, as they've grown into a pretty formidable GOATS team. With the acquisition of Note from the Boston Uprising, the Fuel have finally gotten that all-star level diva player that they've honestly lacked since their existence. And before Fuel fans point out Seagull, he wasn't signed to play diva, it just kinda happened. One of the coolest things to watch this season when it came to the Fuel was the rise of AKM. Don't you remember when he was once a laughingstock in the entire community? It feels like it was just yesterday, but he has come back with consistently impressive Zarya play and a great McCree and Widow when he's asked to pull it out. And we can't forget OG when talking about this tank line. In many ways, OG has turned into the life of the team on and off the stage, and his always entertaining main tank play has rightfully put his name among some of the best in the world. This isn't to forget Unko and Closer, who have both become very strong pieces of the team and make a lot of great behind-the-scenes plays. They've been two extremely strong pickups. Even Zachary, who took a lot of heat in the beginning of the season, has improved a lot. Though honestly, I still feel like he is the weakest part of the starting roster right now, and a lot of the time it feels like the Fuel loses fights because he either gets focused down first or is caught out of position, or both. The path to beating the Fuel seems to go through him. With the Titans ahead of them in round 1, I'll be honest, it's not looking too great, but with all that they've experienced, the Fuel might just surprise people.
Victory!
Well, would you look at that? We have Chinese-based teams in the playoffs for the first time in the history of Overwatch League, and not just one, but two. But we'll get to the other one later, so let's talk Spark, who I believe are in the middle of a pretty significant turnaround. In Stage 1, the Spark had established themselves as an extremely disjointed team who didn't know how to play around either of their main tanks, and honestly felt like they were one of the least clutch teams in the entirety of Overwatch League. That has changed. The Spark have finally committed to main tank Guxue to lead the team, and while there have been some problems as the Chinese player integrated with the rest of the Korean roster, the Spark have looked much more coordinated lately, which has allowed the Overwatch World Cup breakout to start popping off. This all came together with a 3-1 victory over the Dynasty last week, which was an intense winner-go-home situation for both teams. The Spark are finally starting to live up to the potential that they showed in Week 1, and that should be scary because I feel like we need to be reminded that a lot of people were ranking the Spark above the Titans in the preseason. Of course, I can't just talk about Guxue, because almost every member of the Spark has gone extremely underrated this stage. People like Rhea, IDK, and Godsby have faded into the background a bit, while they've all been pulling off some pretty impressive stuff. Not to mention how the Spark have begun integrating players like Crystal and Adore into the team for some maps. It makes me wonder if we're going to see Sassen again. Anyways, if the Spark want to be the first Chinese-based team to win a playoff game, they're gonna have to go through
Victory!
I'll be honest, I, and probably the entire Spitfire fanbase, got a little nervous when we saw Birdring taking the stage again, but thankfully he wasn't going to play his incredibly lackluster Zarya. Instead, he took up the Brigitte position on the team, and I'll be honest, he's been pretty good. At the very least, he's been comparable to Guard, and that's great, because it's obvious that the Spitfire have a lot of value in Birdring's flexibility. One of the more important things, though, is that as a whole, the GOATS comp from the Spitfire has improved dramatically. They've looked a lot more coordinated, especially if you compare their play to the beginning of the season to now. I especially want to give a shout out to Gesture, as his often criticized Reinhardt has looked oddly solid as of late. And so has his Widow. And his Doomfist. Huh. Anyways, Prophet is a god, Fury is a god, Bedozin and Nuss have faded into the background a little bit, but they're still very good. And Krillin is currently undefeated in the Overwatch League, which I believe is much better than his namesake. The most important thing to note about the Spitfire, however, is how they can just wake up one day and decide they're going to win everything, and then no one can stop them. We saw it in the last season playoffs, and I wouldn't be too shocked if we saw it here. When the Spitfire peak, they peak so hard that nobody can touch them. Going in as the Atlantic Division #1 seed, I think other teams should be afraid.
Victory!
What a turnaround! Like, does this not feel exactly like the Season 1 when the Gladiators had a lackluster first stage and managed to turn it around? It felt like instantly? Crazy stuff, honestly. I didn't think Decay's introduction into the roster was going to be so impactful, but hey, here we are. It's not even that his Zarya is even that great in itself. I mean, don't get me wrong, Zarya is top tier for sure, but it's more his synergy with Roar that has put this team over the top. Roar, who was once a very underwhelming replacement for Fissure, has noticeably improved ever since Decay was eligible to play, and combine that with a team that we all know is great with Void, Hydration, Shaz, and Big Goose, and even Surefour subbing in sometimes, and all of a sudden the Gladiators are a top 5 team again. They've even been putting Reaper a couple of times, and he's looked pretty good too. I've always been very impressed with the management of the Gladiators and how stable of a team they seem to be. They've got a lot going for them, and being able to pull through after all of the questions against them in the beginning of the season, and a 1-4 start, shows a lot of mental fortitude. Was their schedule pretty easy? Yeah, looking back, it honestly was, but with all of the craziness and parity in the league right now, being able to consistently put away teams that are way below them is a quality that is honestly kinda rare and should be valued. Even though the Boston game, which they lost against a team that would eventually lose to the Justice in the same week, is a bit of a blemish on their perfect stage, the Gladiators could make a very deep run in these playoffs if the Roar-Decay connection keeps clicking.
Victory!
You have to think really hard about it. Go through all the scenarios that you can think of. Relay the matchups, and of course I'm kidding. I didn't have to think very hard about this at all. I choose the NYXL. Why must you disappoint me so? Why must you disappoint all of us so? How does a team inexplicably crap the bed so many times when they're under pressure? Wow, you made playoffs again. Big deal at this point. You've never missed the playoffs. Your job now as a team is to convince us that you can deliver when the lights are at their brightest. Have you recovered from the Season 1 playoffs? Your performance last stage's playoffs says no, and neither do your 2 losses against the Atlanta Reign this stage. However, even with that said, I think counting the NYXL out is just crazy talk. Theoretically, this is still one of the quote-unquote big 3 teams in this league, and on paper, they have the talent to back it up. Mono and Meko have been one of the strongest tank lines in the world for the entirety of Overwatch League. Libero's flexibility has come in a lot of handy, and his break play has been quite good. Nene's experience with Zarya is one that this team desperately needed with Goat's meta, and he can pull off a very good Tracer and Widow if needed as well. And honestly, what needs to be said about a support line of Jonak and Onimo? Obviously on stage there aren't missing Arc very much. The NYXL are still the only team in the league with multiple stage playoff titles, and even though they're starting off as one of the lower seeds in this tournament, you can't deny that the NYXL still have a very real chance to get a 3rd.
Victory!
They did it! The Golden Stage, as it's been coined, has been achieved for the first time in Overwatch League history, where a team doesn't drop a single map in the entire stage. Sure, their schedule is pretty easy, but even with that, 28 maps in a row is just crazy. Even the Titans have dropped a few maps along the stage, and all you have to do is rewatch the Shock and Dragons match to realize that this achievement was not a breeze. The Shock were pressured a lot, and needed quite a few clutch moments to get through. Which does bring me to Rascal. This stage, we saw Rascal take the full-time starting spot over Architect, and as Babybay explained on Oversight, it had a lot to do with his insane clutch potential. Whether it's on Brig, Baptiste, or even off-meta characters like Roadhog, Rascal's incredible skill and flexibility allow him to be exactly who and what the team needs to get out of the pinch. When you think of the Shock this stage, you also think about players like Sinatra and Violet continuing to show their dominance, and players like Super and Moth finally earning their places among the league's best. The Shock look better right now than they ever have before, and you just know that they're hungry to achieve what was just one map away from them last stage.
Victory!
Okay, so to start off, here's the obligatory 0-40 to playoffs clip. Even though whenever I comment on it, people tell me that it's basically an entirely new team and therefore it's not quite valid, and they're not wrong, every little bit of success that the Dragons experience is huge for the history of this team. And now, the Florida Mayhem are the only one of the original 12 teams to have never made a stage playoff. Everyone laugh at them! Okay, now that that's out of our system, let's talk about the Dragons as of right now. The Dragons are one of the teams that seem to really like the Sombra Goat strategy, which means if you want to defeat the Dragons, you're gonna have to go through Ding. He has quickly turned into one of the best Sombras in the entire league, and the Dragons have won countless fights off of great EMPs from him, and just hacks in general. And when he wants to, he can pull out a lethal Pharah as well. This isn't to discount the rest of the team either. Actually, when you think about the rest of the team, it's tough to point out a weak spot in general. They're a pretty solid, well put together team, but it really feels like it's been Ding who's pushed this team out of the mid-tiers. Of course, a round 1 matchup against a Shock is never fun, especially when they beat them earlier in the stage, but people forget that this game was very close, and if they can look at that bot and improve, there's a decent chance that they can catch a Shock off guard.
Victory!
Well, here they are, the team at the top of it all, who have definitely lived up to their namesake so far, and have still never lost a map on the Overwatch League stage yet. Defined by their aggressive, chaotic playstyle, the Titans have consistently impressed with their GOATS play, and every member of the starting roster is in the conversation for best at their position. Bumper's antics may cause him to feed sometimes, but the ability of this team to take what he gave them and win anyways is incredible. Twilight is yet another contender for Flex Support Rookie of the Year, Slime is considered by most to be a top 3 main support right now, Xiaominsu Zarya is still just as incredible as ever, and Haxel I think has gotten more praise than I've ever seen a Brig player get. So how do you even beat this team? It's tough. I'm genuinely not sure how much I can say to beat them, considering we've never seen a team beat them this season. But unless you're the Shock and can go toe-to-toe with them on GOATS, my best advice is to try and force Titans out of their comfort zone, like the Outlaws did in Busan. Play disruption comps aimed at destroying the synergies that this team has created and force them to make mistakes. If you can do that, honestly, that's when the Titans have looked the most beatable. The problem is getting that to extend for more than one map. Listen, for my prediction this time around, I tried to consider all the options. I really wanted to hit you with something out of left field, but I just can't. I have to take the Titans on this one. As of right now, there is no team that looks more complete and more sure of themselves, and while the Shock's golden stage was really impressive, you have to take strength of schedule into account at least a little bit. And the most important part, the Titans still haven't lost a single game on the Overwatch League stage. They have a perfect record against opponents of all strengths, and have clutched out when their backs are against the wall multiple times. How do you bet against that? Well, at the very least, the NYXL lost their winning streak right after I predicted them to win Stage 1, so maybe my jinx will kick in again. And that'll do it for today's video. Who are you rooting for in the stage playoffs? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you like this video and want to see more like it, leave a like and subscribe. I make competitive Overwatch content once a week, and I would be incredibly happy if you would take a little time out to watch it. Until next time though, that's all from me. Don't get tilted.